Welcome in, everyone, here to Sports Time HQ. You're listening to the Sports Time HQ podcast, of course, where we're going to be talking to you about the NFL, the NFC South, the NFC West, all of them, and breaking down really what we've talked about in the last month of all these projections that we have for our players. I'm here with my great co-host, Gary. Keith will be back next week. I'm Fernando. Let's get things rolling here, Gary. How are you doing?
Doing pretty good. It's another great, Friday, I guess, if you're not on Thursday podcast. But yeah, I'm ready to just talk some football.
Yeah, I couldn't get on yesterday, but hey, we're here today. You know, the show must go on, of course. Might be getting some special guest stars for the month of July. That's going to be exciting. We're going to have full swing of co-hosts with Keith being back, as I've already stated. But, Gary, we finally made it to the final week where we finally don't have to spend hours on hours for these people. Exactly. Of course, we love our lovely fans, but it does take a long time to do these rankings, to do these projections for all these teams. So before we get into it, let's get into some news and notes around the league. Gary, did you hear about the lawsuit? Not the lawsuit, but kind of like the lawsuit about the jury has awarded $4.7 billion in damages to the residential class and $96 million in damages to the commercial class. So basically, residential subscribers will be getting paid their money back from the 2022 season from the DirecTV, 2011 through the 2022 season, should state. Basically, what happened is they broke the antitrust laws by selling the package of the Sunday games at an inflated price. Gary, I don't know if you know this, but this is going to cost each team of the 32 teams approximately $449 million.
Wow. No, I actually didn't know it was going to be that much, but I believe growing up, I know for a fact we had DirecTV. So
you're getting your money back.
I think we will be getting our money back, which is crazy to think about because I always remember thinking and just hearing my parents say, wow, like this is ridiculously expensive for NFL Sunday ticket or whatever it was just to watch games. So yeah, I mean, if that's actually the case, then that's pretty cool getting our money back. But it's crazy to think about like what they're actually doing during these years.
Yeah, and the bigger question to me now is if this does, because obviously the NFL is going to try and fight it some more as much as they can to not pay. But if they do have to pay, and if these teams have to pay, the question goes now to the future of the NFL. Does the salary cap get diminished even more? Because we know it's been inflating year after year, but now is that going to cause the salary cap to go back down?
Yeah, it is crazy to think about. Honestly, I'm not sure, but I think that it would for sure make the league more competitive, considering the fact that you need to make better decisions overall. And what do the players want to do? Do they want to take pay cuts? Do they want to be greedy? It would be cool to see. But yeah, I'm not sure.
It's almost like the market for the NFL is going to crash. Like this is the start of the crash. Yeah. And how they're going to have to kind of restart the whole salary cap. Maybe they're going to go to the MLB type of format.
Yeah,
where it's luxury tax and everything, which I don't know if you like that over the salary cap, or do you have a preference?
They're both cool, but I think that what we see, Shohei Ohtani doing currently with the Dodgers is just like crazy, like just taking the
ridiculous,
pretty much his entire deal
ridiculous
in his last year or after he's gone. So I don't like that aspect, but I'm okay with both of the structures, I guess.
Okay. Well, moving on to our next set of news. Missouri governor on Thursday said that he expects the state to be putting together an aid plan by the end of the year to keep the Kansas City Chiefs and the Kansas City Royals from being lured across state lines to new stadiums in Kansas. So obviously this has been in development for many months now. But Missouri, they renew the efforts. They kind of want to finance up to 70% of the cost of the new stadiums for professional football and the baseball teams. It kind of goes to show that they want to keep Kansas there. But I know if I'm correct, the Kansas City Royals owner does not want to stay there. He wants to move downtown. So it's kind of going to be whether or not they're going to keep the two stadiums side by side like they have.
Yeah, I actually remember you telling me this when we were at school that Kansas City might not be staying, and I was surprised to hear it, especially just that they've been the best team in the league in the next dynasty for the past few years now. So yeah, I did see something about it today. I saw that the governor or mayor, whoever it was, is going to try his hardest to keep the Chiefs where they are right now. So we'll see how that goes. But like I said, it's kind of crazy to think about the fact that they've been the best team / dynasty for the past 5 or so years now, and now they're looking to relocate already.
Exactly, and the Royals already plan on not playing after the 2030 season, but both contracts do finish by the end of the 2031 season. So they still have time, but it does take a while for a new stadium to be built. So time will start to run out very, very soon for these teams. But a team that has officially got possibly a new stadium, or renovations rather, is the Jacksonville Jaguars. $1.4 billion in renovations for Everbank Stadium. This is going to bring the Jaguars one step closer to getting a long-term agreement with the franchise. And basically all they need to do is get an approval by the 24 of the 32 teams. If that happens, they're already going to break ground in the 2025 season. After the 2025 season concludes, and basically finish by the 2028 season. And the Jaguars and the city have already agreed to each contribute $625 million to the renovations. But the city has also agreed to pay $150 million over the next 2 seasons on maintenance and repairs to repair the stadium. Pretty good.
I think it's pretty cool. Just due to the fact that what I think Jags Stadium looks like right now is pretty cool with the pool and everything.
I really want to go there. I really want to go check it out.
It looks really cool. I'm excited to see what they're gonna, renovate or make. So, yeah, I can't wait.
And then finally, we got to talk about the Brandon Ayuk contract saga. Yeah. I mean, it is all over the place. Rumors have been coming about with the Washington Commanders. It's been coming about that maybe he's interested in Pittsburgh. Those are the 2 teams that he's very much interested in playing for. He did mention earlier today, if I do believe, in quotes, there is a quarterback right there, and he's talking about Jaden Daniels, and he's saying that I'm thinking about what I can do with him, and I'm thinking about what if the Niners don't want me to come back to play with them. I'm thinking what I can do, and I know what I can do. So basically him saying that he knows what he's worth, he wants to get paid, and he was at the Niners facility today. We don't know if anything's been done just yet. We'll keep you throughout the whole live broadcast, but yeah, it's looking like the 49ers don't want to get rid of him, but they also don't want to pay him all that much that he wants. If he goes, Gary, I'll ask you this question. If he goes to the Commanders, does Terry McLaurin take a fantasy hit?
Well, here's how I look at it, right? Like, I feel like he's been undervalued for a while now.
Yes.
So, if anything, it might even help his cause, considering the fact that he'll be going up against lesser DBs, I guess you could say. Also, the fact that he's never had another standout guy next to him. So I think the camaraderie will be there. I think that what the Commanders are doing, if they get Ayuk, is special. I'm not, saying they're going to be a top team in the league anytime soon, but I think they can for sure push for a playoff spot. But yeah, I think this Ayuk thing that's going on right now is certainly something to keep an eye on, because if he goes to Pittsburgh, as a Browns fan, I'm pretty scared.
Yeah, I mean, if he goes to the Steelers aren't bad, but
no, not.
They're not. Mike Tomlin always figures out how to have a winning season. I think if he goes to the Commanders, I agree with you. Terry McLaurin might have a little bit more of a bump in his ceiling. So is Jaden Daniels. The person that unfortunately would fall the most is Luke McCaffrey, who just got drafted. Because I'm big on Luke McCaffrey. I really hope he thrives in the NFL. But if he gets pushed down to 4th in the depth chart, Jahan Dotson might not even be relevant in fantasy. He's kind of been like a flex kind of play over the past years. But after that, there's really nothing after Terry McLaurin. So and Brandon Ayuk. So that's the question, the bigger question. But I also think if Brandon Ayuk goes to Washington or even goes to Pittsburgh, I think Brandon Ayuk will not have as good of a season that he has been doing with the 49ers.
Yeah, it's for sure possible. And we're going to talk about him today. We got him in the NFC West. So we'll see what we got to say about him in his current situation, because I'm sure both of us, I did, at least statted him for what we think is going to be his current situation in San Francisco. So, yeah, I think that if he goes to Pittsburgh or Washington, he definitely won't be, what he was last season and what he may be projected this season. But I think over time, if he were to go to either one of those destinations, especially Washington with the young quarterback of Jaden Daniels, he will be able to have seasons like he did last year and probably even better.
Okay. I agree. I can see that happening as well. Gary, before we go into the NFC South, you got any more notes?
I don't. I'm going to just take one quick look at
quick look too. Did he get traded? Did he get traded? Nope. That's it. He didn't get traded yet.
I just see Brandon Ayuk talks about how much he would love to play with Washington Commanders quarterback Jaden Daniels.
Well,
so
that's all the news we got then.
That's all I got.
Let's dive into the NFC South. Carolina Panthers. Let's talk about them. They are brutal, in my opinion, to stats. Bryce Young, I only have him getting 230 fantasy points, which is not that great. That's good enough to be QB 20 from last season.
You said what? How much did you say you had him at?
230.
Oof. Okay, I was a little bit better, I guess. I had him going for 3,700 yards, 21 and 11 touchdown interception ratio. I gave him just short of 250 points, 249.6 to be exact. That's good enough for last year's quarterback 16. Certainly a bump. Still wouldn't necessarily say he's the week-to-week quarterback play, but if you need a guy to fill in for a week, I think he's going to be much more looked at this year than last year.
Yeah, I can see that, especially with the new addition of Deontay Johnson and Xavier Legette. For running backs, I'm intrigued to hear on your running backs because I had both my running backs getting basically 50-50 of the carries in the running back category. I have Jonathan Brooks just breaking more rushing attempts than Chuba Hubbard, but I expected a late season push from Jonathan Brooks to get him over the top above rushing attempts than Chuba. 178 rushing attempts to 176 for Hubbard. Very close, but I have more rushing touchdowns for Jonathan Brooks, which means Jonathan Brooks takes the RB1 in the Carolina Panthers offense, finishing with 167.9 fantasy points, which is not the greatest, but it's the first step. It's good enough to be RB31.
Yeah, I kind of have a similar situation. I gave Hubbard a few more carries, but I have Brooks running for 60 more yards and getting one more touchdown. So he finishes with 178.5 points.
Okay.
That's good enough for last year's RB30. So, yeah, just about the same spot that you got him, where Ezekiel Elliott was last year. So I don't think it's a bad spot for him. Obviously, he's a rookie, and like you had mentioned, he's going to probably have a late season surge, at least in terms of touches. So I wouldn't really expect him to go crazy year one or at the start of the year. But I think he could be a guy that teams might be looking for at the trade deadline. I don't hate that at all. So, yeah, we'll see what he can do.
Okay. Now, about the wide receivers, with Deontay Johnson coming in, it's hard to make Deontay Johnson very relevant because of the fact of Bryce Young at quarterback. I'm not a big Bryce Young fan. Gary, I don't think you are either. Deontay Johnson, I have him getting only 190 fantasy points. Most receiving yards, though, go to Xavier Legette. But 190 for Johnson, 176 for Thielen, and 172 for Legette. But the 190.1, not that good. Good enough to be wide receiver 36, QB3.
I'm surprised I actually gave Leggett that many yards and points. I wasn't so lenient. I have Thielen being the wide receiver one in terms of
Really?
fantasy relevance. I have Deontay being the wide receiver one in terms of production. But yeah, I don't really have Leggett sparking off just yet. He's under 100 points for me. I actually think that they're going to spread the ball out just a little bit more. I think I have Jonathan Mingo getting about the same amount of work as Leggett.
Really?
Yeah, I do. They like him too. So that's just what they do in Carolina. I mean, none of these guys are really X factor wide receivers, so I think they're going to spread the ball out a lot more. But yeah, Adam Thielen takes my top wide receiver spot, 186 points. Definitely a drop off from last year. Only good enough for last year's wide receiver 36.
Wow. Interesting. Tight end, any importance on Tremble or moving away from Tommy?
Yeah, I don't have any relevance for Tommy Tremble, but actually I don't for Jatavion Sanders either, but I actually have him being the tight end one in Carolina.
Okay. I could see that. I can see that very much. I think I have them very close together, 36 targets to 32 targets for both. So Sanders will be tight end one for sure, I believe, by the end of the season, unless Tremble really pops off somehow.
Yeah, I agree. Neither of them, however, of any fantasy relevance just yet.
Well, we wanted to start with one of the worser teams in this league. Now let's get to another worser team in this league, the New Orleans Saints. Let me get in my car, drive down to New Orleans, and Gary, start it off. Does Derek Carr have any fantasy relevance?
As much as I'd love to say no, I actually want to take a look at. Okay, I actually had to take a look back at last year's quarterbacks just to see. But I actually have Derek Carr with 253 points.
Wow.
Good enough for last year's quarterback 16, exactly where he finished last year. I gave him over 4,000 yards. He always finds a way to just get close to that mark, if not go over. A 27-10 ratio, which I felt like was very generous, but he didn't throw a lot of picks last year. And obviously very little rushing work, as he normally does. So, yeah, I mean, as much as I hate Derek Carr, quarterback 16, I have him at. Again, not an every week guy, but if you're scraping the bottom of the barrel and you need a guy for a week, I don't hate it.
I actually was even more generous.
Oh, okay.
I have him finishing with 277.8 fantasy points. Right. That would be good enough for a QB 13, which is just outside the QB 1 range. So if you're looking for a backup quarterback or a QB 2 in your Superflex leagues, he's not a bad option, really. Yeah. And the reason why is because he's got a lot of playmakers around him. He's got Alvin Kamara, Jamal Williams, the unknown of Kendre Miller. Then you go into the receiving category, Chris Olave, Shaheed, Cedric Wilson. I mean, it's a lot of different people that have a chance to be successful and make him successful. You got Taysom Hill, who does whatever he does in New Orleans. Jawan Johnson, he's kind of an upcoming tight end. So it's interesting that I said that because Derek Carr, I did not expect to be a top 15 quarterback, but he's not bad. He's not bad with the people around him. Going to the running backs, this is a tough one. So Alvin Kamara still stays as RB1, but he's really the only relevancy. Jamal Williams, Kendre Miller, Jordan Mims, not really anything. 247.5 fantasy points for Alvin Kamara. That 247 is good to be RB8.
Yeah, I'm pretty much in the same spot. I got him at 245 flat.
Wow. I didn't think you were going to do that.
No, I did. And I do absolutely love Alvin Kamara. I have year after year. Of course, the 1 year I drafted him in the first round was stud year. I believe it was 2 or 3 years ago. 2 years ago. Then he just happened to pop off for 18 fantasy points in the game last year. But what are you going to do? That 245 flat is good enough for last year's RB10, Jahmyr Gibbs last year. Yeah, I mean, he's going to get his receiving work like he does every year. I have him at 450 and 3 touchdowns in the receiving category. I gave him just shy of 800 rushing yards and 6 rushing touchdowns. So he's that do-it-all, receiving back that we love to see play the game of football, and I think he's gonna get back into the top 10 with these numbers.
My question to you is, in Dynasty, are you looking to, obviously his age is getting up there, are you looking to try and sell him to get as much as you can now, or just ride the wave with him until he's fallen off?
I think that if you can get someone that's very, very eager before the start of this season, then I would for sure see your options. If you like it, pull the trigger, get rid of him. But if you're halfway through the season at the trade deadline and someone's just trying to shoot you an offer that you're kind of iffy on, I would just ride it out with them. I mean, we have seen some instances where he gets injured, so that's always a possibility and an unfortunate possibility. But all in all, I feel like majority of the time you got to know where Alvin Kamara is going to sit around. You're not going to know how he's going to, but he's probably going to give you 15 points a game. So I would say if you get a good offer early before the season starts, take it. But if someone's not eager to get him, I would just keep him.
Dynasty offer, let me give you a first-round pick for Alvin Kamara, straight up. Not for this year, though, for next year. Say the rookie draft has already went. Next year's first round. Would you take it?
I'd probably take it.
Okay. Now, how about this? 2 seconds. One for 2025, one for 2026.
Probably not. I would think about it, but probably not.
Redraft leagues, if he's going in the third round, are you drafting him?
Yeah.
Okay. I think if I'm drafting a running back in the third round, I'd rather look somewhere else, in my opinion. And the only reason...
Go ahead. Yeah.
I was going to say only the reason... I'm not saying he's bad. We both have him finishing top 10 from last year's rankings. But the reason why is he's getting up there in age. This could be the year he downfalls into an Austin Eckler, who Austin Eckler, by the way, looking fantastic for Washington. I don't know if you saw that video. Yeah. Little hype video for him. But I think I'm drafting Alvin Kamara right now as an RB2. Like, you can make sure RB2, he's fine. I'd rather have one running back that you can really rely on every week.
I can 100% understand that. I would think that I need to know my position in the draft and also who's left on the board. But in general, I would probably pull a trigger on Kamara in the third if it just came down to it.
Okay. Let's go on to our wide receivers. Chris Olave up on the top of the pedestal for them. He's actually my wide receiver 7 from last year into this year. Last year he finished as a wide receiver 16. He breaks into the top 10. He finishes with a solid 284.7 fantasy points, breaking over 1,300 receiving yards and 7 touchdowns.
I love it. I mean, I can't be mad at it. Another stud from OSU. I wish I could have him that high. It's just Derek Carr is just so inconsistent, and he puts him in so many tough situations. You always see him, getting concussions and his head smacking the turf because he just throws him hospital balls like 24/7. And if he's not coming down with it, then it's either injury or it's way overthrown. So as much as I love Olave, trust me, I do. I still gave him some good numbers. I gave him 11, 22, and 6 touchdowns. So that's good enough for 235.2 points. Exactly where he finished last year, wide receiver 16, which I don't hate by any means. Still really, really solid wide receiver 2. If you're drafting him as a wide receiver 1, I wouldn't. I really wouldn't at all. I think I'd have to see where he's going first. But I would never draft Olave as a wide receiver 1. It's just too inconsistent, the quarterback play.
Okay. I'd personally be fine with drafting Olave first as my wide receiver 1. But I do want to talk about Rashid Shaheed because of the fact that he is fantasy relevant. For me, he's a wide receiver 3 in this books, finishing as a wide receiver 36 with 190.1 fantasy points. I think he's another guy you can solidify in the late rounds of your redraft leagues. Go get him and play him either in your wide receiver 3 slot or a flex, and he's an easy plug and play.
Yeah, I'm right on the same spot. I gave him 189.2. Good enough for year's wide receiver 35. So, yeah.
I just want to talk about the mystery man before we move on from New Orleans. listed as a tight end, plays quarterback, plays running back, plays receiver, plays whatever you want him to play. Taysom Hill, the guy's old, but he looks like he's young. I have him finishing at 152.2 fantasy points. If you look at the fantasy value for tight ends, that's right around where he finished last year. He finished as a tight end 12. This time he'd be finishing as the tight end 10. So I just want to say that Taysom Hill's so inconsistent. Do not draft him. He's going to get you points and he's on the bench, but when you start him, he's going to give you donuts.
Exactly. I couldn't have said it any better. I have him listed as tight end 13. I gave him 138 points. I said it earlier. I love Kamara so much, and it's why I hate Taysom Hill, because he just takes like at least 5 or 6 carries away from him, and even receiving work too. It's just so annoying seeing him in the backfield and not Kamara, who should be back there every single play. So yeah, I'm not drafting him. I'm staying away from him. Like I said, I couldn't have said it any better the way that you said it. He comes in, he'll have like 2 or 3 games where he's got like 25 points, and then the rest will be 5 or 6. So
can I ask you how many times you have him rushing?
Oh yeah, I gave him, I think, 80 carries. Yeah, 80 carries.
I gave him 85 carries, so right around the same.
That's about what he had last year.
Yeah.
I was so astounded when I saw that number, honestly. Like I said, I hate seeing him run every most. 81, I believe, was the number. That's crazy.
Yeah. Wild to think about. Let's go into one of the mysterious teams of the NFC South. This team has a lot of new faces. NFC North Atlanta Falcons. The Atlanta Falcons have a new QB under the helm. It's Kirk Cousins, a.k.a. my cousin. As much as I want him to be a top 10 quarterback, it's tough to do getting a torn Achilles, coming back in your 30s, and being able to be fantasy relevant. He is still, don't get me wrong, and he's going to have you good weeks, but Justin Jefferson's not there. Jordan Addison's not there. I think the team that he has is great, but I think it's a team tiered down than what he had. I have him finishing 268.7 fantasy points, which is good enough to be QB 14.
Yeah, again, I'm right around the same spot. I only gave him 250, though. I actually gave Penix a few stats. Just due to the fact that I don't think they're going to keep him benched the entire season. I really don't.
Really?
I think he'll get in there for a game or two.
I think that'd be dumb.
It annoys me to think that way, but I don't know. I can't see a scenario where they just spend their number 8, first round pick on him and not give him at least some work in the first year. But the fact of the matter is he didn't even cross 40 points. So that's whatever. It doesn't help his case. Just takes away from Kirk's fantasy relevance. As I said, I have Kirk finishing at 250.2 fantasy points. Good enough for last year's quarterback 16. So, yeah, I would agree with you in the sense that it's not the same team that he had last year, the same offensive weapons at least. I mean, it's kind of tough to get better than Justin Jefferson, TJ Hawkinson, and even Jordan Addison. But, I think he wanted to be in Atlanta, so he's going to want to play, especially with Penix behind him. I think it's going to light a fire under him. So who knows? Maybe he does better than we have projected, but I always like to draft him as my backup quarterback. I might still do it.
Me too.
I might still do it because he gives you 20 points a game.
He does.
He does every single time, and so many people sleep on it. But we'll see. I think it'll be fun to see him in a new offense.
Now, someone who's already been in this offense is Bijan Robinson. I finally have him breaking 1,000 rushing yards finally in his career for the NFL. 239.4 fantasy points for him. That 239 is actually pretty good enough to be RB11. So he becomes another top 12 running back once again for the second straight year. He finished last year as the RB9. Takes a little step back, but still solid RB1.
You might hate what I have. I don't know if you're a Bijan guy or not.
Not really. Not really.
I'm really not either, but I have him at 290. I couldn't believe it, but I have him at 290 fantasy points.
Wow.
Yeah, I gave him over 1,000 rushing yards, just past it. I have him at 12 total touchdowns, 500 receiving yards. So a big bulk of it is coming from the receiving game for sure. But yeah, I have him at 290 fantasy points. I believe that's good enough for last year's running back 3 by half a point. So pretty much the running back.
Wow.
Yeah. So
You might as well give him another reception at that point.
I just remember that, he was being drafted last year at like running back 4 or something like that. So, I mean, at least it gives it value in my opinion, because he was going around that same spot last year. So I'm not totally upset with it because I think it can happen. I really do. But we'll see.
I think there is a possibility where he does end up being that big monster of a running back. I mean, we've seen him do it, be a top 10 running back last year. There would be no surprise that 290 could be his ceiling. I could see it, no doubt.
Let's also be honest. I don't think especially towards the end of the year, people were so upset and had a lot of questions because the Atlanta offense just didn't use him.
No.
At all in some games. And people were like, is he hurt? Is he sick? And no, he was just not playing, and it was weird. But I think the Falcons are going to actually, use their head and wake up this year. He's their guy. They drafted him in the first round. So I like him for this year.
Now, what about Drake London? I have this guy right around the same fantasy points as Bijan Robinson, finishing with over 1,000 receiving yards, 9 touchdowns. He finished with 245.7 fantasy points, which is good to be the wide receiver 15.
Yeah, I wasn't that generous. I'm pretty sure you're not, but I'm not a Drake London guy. Yeah.
The only reason why I gave him that much is because of Kirk Cousins.
I get it. Yeah, and that's the only reason why I gave him what I gave him, which is 210.6. I don't have him cracking 1,000, just coming up short, 970. I only gave him 6 touchdowns, and that's because I have another guy being in the end zone target. So, yeah, like I said, I only gave him 210.6, which is good enough for last year's wide receiver 28.
He finished wide receiver 36 last year, so.
Yeah, it's definitely a step up. People are going to hate it because he's being drafted like within the top 15 wide receivers.
He's too high being drafted.
I know. I completely agree. I think it's absurd. If you're drafting Drake London in the first 3 rounds, I think you're idiotic.
Yes.
So, yeah, I'll just throw that out there. But, yeah, I have him finishing wide receiver 26. I don't think that's bad at all.
No, I don't think it's bad at all. I think it's a good take on your part. I think mine's more of a hotter take, but I think it's only an uptick of a take because of Kirk Cousins being there. But Kyle Pitts obviously becomes tight end relevant for me, and I'm sure for you. He finishes with about 200 yards shy of 1,000, gets into the end zone 6 times, good enough to be 182.9 fantasy points, which is pretty good because you end up being the tight end 7. Last year, he finishes a tight end 13.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I have. I have him in the end zone 7 times. I also gave him 760 yards. That's good enough for 177.6 points. Last year's tight end 9. So I don't think that's a bad take by any means. It's a step up. So
yeah, I mean it's pretty good in my opinion. I wasn't a big Pitts fan. I think he was the most overdrafted tight end in fantasy for the past few years. Finally, he kind of leveled out to where he is supposed to be. And I think now I'm fine drafting him because his value is finally a decent value versus way overvalued.
Agreed.
Let's go into our final NFC South team. Let's go down to Florida and go check out the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Gary, I'll start with you. Talk to me about Mr. Baker Mayfield. Does he bake once again, a former Cleveland player?
Yeah, he looked great last year. Gave him a playoff win. I'm I'm happy for him. I don't think we pulled the trigger too early. I don't, but a lot of people do. But I think that we saw high highs and we saw low lows, and I think if you're a fan of the NFL, you have no problem admitting that the rest of our roster is a Super Bowl caliber roster. It was just
Your Cleveland team?
Yeah, it was, and it is now.
This year?
I mean, outside of the quarterback position, yeah, for sure. The defense is legit, and we have everything else. And a healthy Nick Chubb is obviously just about as good as you can get. So the fact of the matter is, it was time for a change. We had the stuff around him. He just was way too inconsistent. He played through an injury, a bad injury, which I didn't like at all. I would have loved to see him get that surgery, and I think that the story might have been different if he did. But the fact of the matter is, it was time to move on, and we did. So I like Baker. I can't be mad at what he's doing right now. I'm not upset at all. So I have him just shy of 300 points, 299 to be exact. I gave him almost 4,400 passing yards, 31 and a 14 split. I've seen Baker's story too many times. Great quarterback at times, but other times he puts the ball into harm's way a little bit. But the 299 is still a great number. That's good enough that's better than last year. Quarterback 8, he finished quarterback 10. So still another quarterback one play.
You mentioned how he finished his QB 10 last year. This year, I do expect him to take another uptick in his potential and really showing how much of a star he actually is and how much of a first-round overall pick guy he is truly turning out to be. You have him finishing as QB 8. I have him actually finishing a little higher. I have him finishing as the QB 6 with 308.6 fantasy points. Gets over 4,400 passing yards, 33 touchdowns, and 12 interceptions. Gets a rushing touchdown, over 64 rushing attempts.
Yeah, that's fine with me. I mean, I think he's going to go up. It's just his interception numbers are a little bit too.
Do you think the year he kind of stayed behind Brady, do you think that helped him really excel to what he is now? Or do you think he just needed a new team to be on? He wasn't in the right formula.
It's possible, but I think that he needed the new space.
New scenery.
Yeah, because I think he loved Cleveland. He showed it. He was so ecstatic when he played every single game. But some of the fans drove him out too. I mean, it's not like he was as happy, in Cleveland when he started to when he left. He knew that there was this tension, and he agreed that it was time to split up. So I really do think it was just the scenery, and I think he's really, really happy now. So like I said, I'm happy for him.
Now, what about Rachaad White? I like Rachaad White a lot, actually. I have him rushing over 1,000 rushing yards once again. He actually finishes right near where your guy you were talking about getting 290. This guy finishes with 279 fantasy points. That is good to be the RB4, and that is exactly where he finished last year.
Yeah, I absolutely love it. I had him in 2 or 3 leagues last year, and I couldn't have been happier. I expected a breakout from him, and that's exactly what he did. I gave him a bulk of receiving and rushing work, just shy of 1,000. I gave him 990 rushing yards, but 10 total touchdowns, good enough to give him 274.3. It's probably close to where he was last year. Yeah, running back 5. Running back 4. Running back 4. Yeah, it's exactly where he finished last year. So, I don't think that drafting Rachaad White's a mistake at all. I know people were so scared to draft him last year for some reason, but I thought it was a match made in heaven. No other running back was there, and I loved the fact that I knew what Baker did, and there was a lot of short dump offs in his time in Cleveland, a lot. So I knew he was going to do it, and it's exactly what happened. So, loving Rachaad White next year too.
Now I'm going to ask you at the receivers, who do you have finishing better? Is it Chris Godwin or is it Mike Evans?
Yeah, it's Mike Evans, and it's a 40-point difference for me. I really can't see Chris Godwin overtaking Mike Evans. I mean, you already know Mike Evans is going to eclipse 1,000. I have him just shy of 1,200. And I don't know if anybody remembers the touchdown differential between the two last year, but it was enormous. I believe Mike Evans had 13 or 14 last year, and Chris Godwin had 2. So, yeah, I mean, I don't think it's going to be much different this year. I gave 11 in favor of Mike Evans and 4 in favor of Godwin. So, yeah, I do have Mike Evans, and I don't think it's really up for debate. I have Evans finishing at 257.7, good enough for last year's wide receiver 13, just outside that wide receiver 1 spot. A little bit of a drop off, but I think he's still going to be an everyday play. I mean, it's not even a question.
I have him finishing just a little bit better than you. Have him finishing as the wide receiver 10 in fantasy, but he does get 271.4 fantasy points. He last year finished with wide receiver 7 with a good chunk of fantasy points with a good 282.5. So he does take a little step back. Chris Godwin, of course, does get 221 fantasy points for me. It's good enough to be a wide receiver 23. And I think last year he finished near that. He finished wide receiver 28.
Yeah, I don't have a bad number for Godwin either. 217.3. That's good enough for last year's wide receiver 25. Better than last year. So
perfect enough. What about Cade Otton? I like Cade Otton. I really like this guy. I think Baker likes this guy a lot. And I have him finishing with 138.4 fantasy points. I want to say that's good enough to be a top 10, but it's really not, but it's just shy of it. 138 points, whatever I said, fantasy points, is tight end 13, where Kyle Pitts finished. Cade Otton last year, he had his ups and downs, finished as a tight end 20. He will do better than what he did last year as he finishes with 138.4.
Yeah, I don't have that.
Really?
No, I haven't taken a step down actually, and for the exact reason that what you said. He had his ups and downs. I think the downs outweigh a little bit more the ups this year. I think if Baker wants to make a name for himself, I think he's gonna go to his guys, Evans and Godwin. So I think he kind of shies away from the Cade Otton role, love, I guess. I don't have him being fantasy relevant. I have him, under 100 points. So good enough for last year's tight end 26, where Juwan Johnson's at. So
I think that is the biggest gap difference of any player that we have done for this past month.
No, I can tell you which one it is.
Which one is it?
Marvin Mims.
Oh, well, that was a good one. That is a good one. I will agree. Marvin Mims. I'm telling you, Marvin Mims is gonna be good.
I don't think so, but this is up there for sure. Like a 40, 50 point difference.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just don't see it. He's not a bad player by any means. I mean, I still gave him 400 yards and 3 touchdowns. So it's not like he's not anything, but I don't think so.
Well, that's concluded the NFC South. We have one more division to go, NFC West. But before we get into that and start talking about the Seattle Seahawks, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about Underdog Fantasy. If you go use that code SportsTimeHQ, they're going to match your first deposit up to $100. That is code SportsTimeHQ. Go use that code and use it, and they'll match first deposit up to $100, as well as Mr. Trophy Smack himself. TrophySmack.com/SportsTimeHQ. You see that trophy. You see that mystery box. That mystery box is going to be open tomorrow. That is already open over there. If I can put my finger over there. It's a great trophy. It's huge. That trophy is huge. All for $170. And you basically just split it between your league mates. I mean, you put $20 per league mate, 10 people. That's $200 for the winner. That $200 can go to TrophySmack.com/SportsTimeHQ and go get that trophy. Maybe give the winning player $20 and the trophy, or give them all the extra $30. Do whatever you got to do to get this trophy from TrophySmack.com/SportsTimeHQ. All right, let's get into it. I'm done talking about promos. Seattle Seahawks Talk to me, Gary. Does Geno Smith become fantasy relevant still? That guy that had the QB5 season, he was doing so well. Is he the talk of the talk in Seattle town?
No. Short answer, no. It's possibly because I actually think that, as much as I hate saying this, I think Sam Howell is going to get some work sometime this year. So I didn't give him a hefty bulk, but I gave him a 75-25 split.
Wow.
So, yeah, I think he gets in there for 5 games or so. But yeah, I mean, I finished Geno Smith with 232.1, good enough for last year's quarterback 20. That's one spot lower where he finished last year, believe it or not. So,
can you tell me again how many fantasy points you had him finishing?
232.1.
Okay.
Yeah. So
I thought you said 241, and I was going to say that's exactly what I have.
No, I have 232.1, and that it makes me happier knowing that you don't have a crazier difference. It's not a bad season for Geno. 3,500 yards, 23 and a 10 ratio. I think his wide receivers are going to have great years. So
yeah,
we'll get to that.
They very much are. I have him finishing as a QB 17 with 241.9. But the difference is between you and I, Gary, is you have a 75-25 split between the quarterback play. I have a 90-10 split between the QB play. Going into the running backs, this one's a tough one to really stat out because I'm not a Ken Walker fan, and I never really was. But he is not going to do the best, but he's also not going to do the worst. He's still going to be fantasy relevant. He's going to break 200 fantasy points. I am finishing with 208.2 fantasy points, eclipsing over 900 rushing yards. The 208.2 is good enough to be an RB 17, which he finished as RB 19 last year.
Yeah, I have the exact same thing. I have him at 206 flat, good enough for last year's RB 18. I also have never been a Ken Walker guy, and still am not. I have him just shy of 1,000 yards. I gave him 9 touchdowns. But, I feel like too many people love him when he is a solid back, but he doesn't have a hefty yard per carry. Actually,
no, he doesn't.
It's not bad, but
it's not too bad.
Yeah, it's not bad, but I think it could be better, and I think his receiving efficiency isn't what it should be either. So, I don't think 206 is a bad number. Like you said, he's a spot higher than he was last year, or 2 spots higher. So, I don't know.
Now, I'm gonna skip elaborating on running backs because we don't like Ken Walker, and I think he's a solid guy to draft as an RB2, maybe RB3 on your team, but I'd be safer drafting him as an RB3 than an RB2, in my opinion. For the wide receivers, there is a new sheriff in town, and no, it is not DK Metcalf. No, it is not Tyler Lockett. It's Mr. Jackson Smith-Njigba.
Yes.
Now, I do not have him beating in PPR fantasy points DK Metcalf, but the new sheriff for the wide receiver 2 position is Jackson Smith-Njigba. I like him a lot. He was so overhyped personally, and I just could never be able to pay up and draft him because of how high he was going in dynasty leagues and how high he was still going in redraft leagues in his first year. He's now leveled out again, as I was saying, but Tyler Lockett's age is also getting up there, which means he's starting on a decline. More targets go to Jackson Smith, more receiving yards go to Tyler Lockett between the two, but more fantasy points go overall to Jackson Smith-Njigba. He finishes with 174 points flat. The 174 flat is good enough to be the wide receiver 38, so he's still good flex play in my opinion. But of course, DK Metcalf is the overall wide receiver 1. He only finishes with 211.5 fantasy points. That 211.5 is good enough to be the wide receiver 28. Last year, he finishes the wide receiver 21. So a little decline, and I think that's because of kind of the quarterback play that we're going to be seeing between both Geno Smith and Sam Howell.
Yeah, I love it. I can't be mad at that. I was actually a little bit more lenient in every aspect, though. I gave JS some more points. I still gave Tyler Lockett a good amount. What'd you give to Lockett?
For fantasy points, I gave him 160.3.
Yeah, so I was better all around. I have JSN at 193.9.
Okay.
I agree. I think he was never really utilized to his fullest potential in Seattle last year, and I think that they know that, and they're going to use him so much more this year. And I agree that Tyler Lockett's age is getting up there. He's always been a solid wide receiver, but he might take a step down. I have JSN finishing at last year's wide receiver 35, and Tyler Lockett just a few points less than JSN, 188, good enough for last year's 36. So pretty much in the same spot. But I was never a DK guy either, but I have him just shy of 1,300 yards. I gave him 9 touchdowns, good enough for 255.8 points.
Wow.
So last year's wide receiver 13, just outside the top 12. So, yeah, I mean, I think that if you're a DK fan, you're excited about that because
I love it.
He was so good, and he still is, obviously, but for fantasy purposes, he was only, that 10 to 12 point guy a week when you expect him to be, 15 to 16. So yeah, I think you're going to be getting a lot more from DK than what last year. I don't even remember where he finished last year.
I think I said 28, if I do believe, or 26.
21 for DK.
21.
So about almost 10 spots higher, just about. So I think he's going to be a lot better.
What about former first-round pick Noah Fant? I love the dude, and I always was hoping for success with the dude. But the only problem is he's got limited potential with the team that he's on, and I have him being irrelevant in fantasy for tight ends.
I completely agree. I only have him at 85 points. I do like, I do like Noah Fant too, but too many mouths to feed here. I don't think
very much
he's gonna be one of them that gets fed a lot. So
I have him finishing with 111.9, which is very generous to what you gave him.
I agree.
Let's go into the Los Angeles Rams, a team that won the Super Bowl just a couple of years ago, or is it now been a few years? I don't even know. Time flies. A few years ago, because Kansas City won back-to-back. Will they three-peat? Who knows? But Los Angeles Rams, Matthew Stafford, he still is fantasy relevant. He gets the ball going. He's got so many good people around him. Puka Nacua, one of the biggest stars coming out of last year's draft in the late rounds. 288.5 fantasy points for Stafford, just shy of 4,500, 31 passing touchdowns, 13 interceptions. That 288.5, well, guess what, ladies and gentlemen? That's good enough to be the QB 9. Stafford last year, he finished the QB 15, so he's back in the top 10 from what the players finished last year in.
I love it. I have him just outside the top 10 and at quarterback 11. I gave him 283.3. Spot on, 33 and 13 with the touchdown interception ratio. Little less in the yardage category. That's probably what the differential was.
Yeah.
But I agree. This team is started offensively, and the guy I can't wait to talk about is Kyren Williams.
I cannot stand Kyren Williams.
No.
I was not a Kyren Williams believer.
Either was I. I won't lie.
He turned me around last year when he really showed how successful he can be. His yards per carry, he has 5 yards per carry. 5 yards per carry. That's insanely good for a running back. His catch percentage needs a little bit of work, though, I will say. But he does eclipse over 1,000 rushing yards. He finishes 262.2 fantasy points. That 262 is exactly where he finished as the running back 7.
I love it. I actually was a little bit more generous. How many yards exactly did you give him, rushing yards?
Rushing yards, 1,170.
Yeah, I gave him 100 more. I gave him 1,275.
Wow.
Yeah, I love Kyren Williams this year.
You have him as a top 5 running back.
Oh, easily. I have him at 277.8. Off the top of my head, I don't know what that is, but
277.8 is an RB4.
RB4. I love Kyren this year. I think he's such a beast. that 5 yards per carry, really, I love yards per carry. I love that stat. Nick Chubb, it's what he was always known for, still is. So that's what sets him apart from the rest of the league. And I think Kyron this year shows that he's a top 10 back in fantasy. He's going to be even better than that. So
now, Blake Corum, I have as the RB2 there. He does get a lot of work, and he does become semi-fantasy relevant. Finishes 137.7 fantasy points. That 137, good enough to be the RB36. So like a Tyler Algier type of player, Tajay Spears kind of player. So he's a guy that can be a plug in as a flex player. So just keep an eye on Blake Corum. I think he'd be a solid flex.
I'm afraid not. This is actually probably the biggest differential. I only have him at 65 points. So,
wow.
Yeah. I really don't think he's going to get a lot. I know the Rams like to do, RB by committee and have for a while now. But like I said, I think this is Kyron's breakout year. I don't think they're going to need the extra work from anybody else in this running back room. I think Kyron's the guy. Nobody else is fantasy relevant, in my opinion. Blake Corum, comes in at 65.2 points.
What about wide receivers? Do you have 2 receivers breaking 200 fantasy points?
Of course. Yeah, I do.
Of course. All right. Cooper Kupp comes in as the wide receiver 2 on this team for fantasy. Puka Nacua stays on top of the wide receiver room for fantasy. I have Puka Nacua finishing with 298.1 fantasy points. Wow. That 298.1 is good enough to be the wide receiver 5, which is one wide receiver more or less than what he did. He finished the wide receiver 4 last year, finishing wide receiver 5 this year. But I do want to mention quickly Cooper Kupp finishing 232.1. That 232, good enough to be a solid wide receiver 16. So he's still fantasy relevant, but Puka Nacua is their guy.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. I mean, Cooper Kupp is not bad by any means. He didn't necessarily fall off, maybe just a tad. But he's
because of the injury.
Yeah, and that's exactly what it is. But it's also the fact that I think that Stafford, I'm not going to say, he made Kupp's Triple Crown season, but Stafford throws to wide receiver ones. That's
very true.
That's it. So I think that when you're going into the season, you got to think that Nacua is a wide receiver 1 again. I have him not in the spot that you had him, but again, not bad. 272.1. That's good enough for last year's wide receiver 10, where Devontae's at. I have Kupp at 230.5. Of course, still relevant. That's wide receiver 18. So I don't think that you can draft these guys around the same range. I know that people have that question floating around. Should they be drafted around the same spot? I don't think so. I have about 10 or so wide receiver spots separating them. So I still love them both as candidates, but you also have to factor in Cooper Kupp's injury status. It's up in the air.
Here's my question. Are you willing to pair up Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua on your fantasy football team?
Probably not, because we saw it last year. It was very, very few times that both of them were able to pop off same game. So I probably wouldn't. Then again, there aren't a lot of duos that I would. So, yeah, I don't know.
For Tyler Higbee in the tight end group, unfortunately, he still is irrelevant in the fantasy world, only getting 120.5 fantasy points. No need to tell where he is on the tight end rankings because it's not relevant enough. If you're not a top 10 tight end or top 12, you're not relevant. Really, if you're not top 8.
I actually have Colby Parkinson doing better than Tyler Higbee.
Wow.
And that's just because I don't know what it was with the Rams, but they were just so eager to get this Colby Parkinson deal done. I don't know what it was. It was the first deal made at the NFL.
That's very true.
Agency opening, and it was for a bunch of money. I'm not entirely sure why, but those are the 2 factors why I have him being the tight end 1 now. I have him beating out Higbee by 40 fantasy points.
Wow.
So, yeah, it's neither of them are fantasy relevant, but just for a number, I gave Parkinson 123.8. So, tight end 18, not awful, but definitely not an every week guy. So
That's our biggest difference between you and I.
Really?
With you having it, I only have him with 35 fantasy points.
wow, okay. Well, I just can't see them. I don't exactly remember the number off the top of my head, but they gave him a boatload of money for absolutely no reason. So they must use him. That's just what I'm thinking. So
Yeah, Cody Parkinson signed a 3-year, $22.5 million deal. That's
yeah,
about $7 million a year.
why are you giving him that? Am I just missing something?
It makes no sense,
It doesn't. And like I said,
especially when you have Tyler Higbee.
it was
Personally,
exactly. It made no sense to me. And like I said, it was the first deal. It was literally like 5 to 10 minutes after it opened up. So
very
they've
true.
been so eager to get him. I don't know what it is, but the fact of the matter is neither of them are fantasy relevant.
Let's go into two more teams, two more red, possibly powerful teams. Gary might think that we're talking about the golden red team, but we're talking about the red and black or red and white, whichever one you really want to go with, alternate jerseys or not. It's the Arizona Cardinals, the most hypest team that I'm on right now. I am in love with the Arizona Cardinals this season. Why? Because Kyler Murray is going to have a bounce back year. He's going to have a comeback player of the year. 29 passing touchdowns don't seem that much, but man, can he rush the ball. He rushes for over 500 rushing yards, 45 passing yards, 5 rushing touchdowns, only 11 interceptions. This guy becomes 357.8 fantasy points to become the QB3 from last year.
I mean, I'm in the same spot. It's crazy, but I am. I have last year's quarterback 4, 342.2 points. I mean, I think Marvin Harrison is just going to bring Kyler back. You know,
Yeah.
Obviously he was injured and was dealing with some things, but I think he is going to come back. I think he wants to play football. Like I said, I think him and Marvin Harrison are going to be such a good duo, a likable duo. I've said this so many times, and Marvin Harrison, his kind of gameplay reminds me of a young D-Hop, and we already saw that connection once. So when they were teammates, they were what? The 1 seed in the NFC West, which was random, but it happened. And I'm not going to say they're going to do the same thing. You might, but they're not. I still don't think they're going to be a good team, but I think that connection is going to be something special. Yeah, I have Kyler Murray at 342.4, good for last year's quarterback 4.
Perfect. Now for running backs, because there's 2 running backs that I want to talk about, James Conner and Trey Benson. I have, and I think, Gary, you're going to agree with me on this one, I have a new running back being the RB1 by the end of the year. Trey Benson becomes the RB1 by the end of the year. Does not outbeat James Conner in fantasy points, though, just shy. But both are relevant. James Conner finishes with 188.3 fantasy points. Good enough to be the RB27. And then as for Trey Benson, he becomes the 162.5 fantasy points to become RB33.
No, I actually disagree with you.
Okay. Disagree with me then. Disagree with me.
For a number of reasons.
You don't like Trey Benson?
It's not necessarily that. I think Trey Benson's No, I do. Yeah, I think Trey Benson's a great player. I don't think he's going to get the work that so many people think, though. James Conner just came off one of his best seasons. I possibly could be.
That's okay. Running backs don't care. The running backs don't matter in this league. Come on now. You know that.
So why would Trey Benson automatically become great then if they don't matter?
Well, because they drafted him.
Okay. Well,
it's their new prized possession.
They traded for James Conner a few years ago, and he just ran for over 1,000 yards. I am doing it again. I gave him 1,025 rushing yards, 8 touchdowns. Nothing crazy, but I don't think people understand. He somehow finds a way to be like a top 15 RB every year or around that spot.
What?
He does. I mean, he was 18 last year.
He was.
But he does. I don't think people seem to notice that, but it happens. I have him at 197.9 points, not top 15, but RB22. And I'm sure you will get him for great value if you were to land an RB22.
22 is not bad for James Conner. I could see that definitely for sure as his ceiling. I mean, like I mentioned, that 188 was good enough to be RB 28. I said. So again, the low end RB2 range. But again, if you draft him as your third, fourth running back, because I think that's where he's going in ADP based on his ADP, that's a solid deal.
So I actually would like to ask you a question. So he's been with Arizona in the past 3 years. What do you think his finishes were? Just a rough estimate. What do you think his finishes were? RB what, and what?
I would have to say maybe RB like he must have been in the RB 20s every single year when he was in Arizona. Like maybe like an RB 29, RB 27, and then the RB whatever he finished last year,
13?
RB 18.
Yeah. Or 18, sorry, 18. All right, well, let me tell you. RB 9, RB 12, and RB 18.
Wow.
So I don't get it. People overlook him every year.
Maybe I'm overlooking him. Maybe I'm going to have to adjust my fantasy. Who knows?
It's fine. I mean, like I said, I don't have him being like a breakout guy at all at RB 22, but I think he's going to be great for the value. He is every single year. And so I only drafted him once during that 10-year, but I've noticed it.
Hear me out. Do you think he is kind of like the Austin Eckler of running backs now, where he's a guy that should be drafted higher in rounds, but never is because he's so undervalued?
Yeah, it's possible. I mean, it's also where he is. I mean, Arizona really, besides that year that they went to the playoff, or that they went to the playoffs and they were like the 1 seed in the NFC West, whatever it was. Mm-hmm. They started like 10-0 or whatever it was. They haven't really been relevant. They were one of the worst teams last year, and the year before that. So it could be that gets overlooked. I mean, their offense is bad. That's just what it is. But James Conner, for some reason, finds a way to be relevant every year. So I don't know.
Let me ask you, take a guess of where he's being drafted right now in fantasy.
I'd probably say, I would say like mid-30s.
No, but you'd be right on Trey Benson in mid-30s. Trey Benson's being drafted as the RB 36. James Conner is actually being drafted at a decent value, RB 24.
Good.
But he could easily smash it based on where he's.
Yeah, for sure.
I think he definitely takes a step back though this year, only because Kyler Murray is back healthy.
I agree. Yeah, for sure.
Marvin Harrison, as we know, he's going to win Offensive Rookie of the Year. Gary loves to hear it. An OSU fan. 1,256 receiving yards, 8 touchdowns. This guy finishes with 252.6 fantasy points. The 252 is good enough to be Gary, wide receiver 13.
Love it. A point behind you, actually.
Wow.
I gave him 251.1. I gave him 8 touchdowns, a little less receiving work, but I actually gave him some rushing work. He did it at OSU.
I gave him
did you?
I don't think he's going to rush that much. I think they're going to give it to Greg Dortch for the most part.
Well, I only gave him 5 carries, and that's just due to the fact that he did it at OSU. But I gave him a touchdown, so that was probably where the little bit of a boost came from. But nonetheless, 251.1. That's good enough for last year's wide receiver 13. Exactly. So
perfect. Michael Wilson, I really like him a lot, and I think Arizona loves him a lot too. Just keep an eye out on him. If he falls in late rounds, which he will, I'm finishing with 163 fantasy points. That 163 is good enough to be the RB 41, wide receiver 41, sorry. But he's a guy that could easily smash that right now because he's going to be the wide receiver 2 there. But he'll be third on the receiving category because Trey McBride. But just keep an eye out because Wilson did do a lot of weeks really good, and he was fantasy relevant for a few of them.
I don't hate that at all. His yard per reception is kind of crazy to think about. But Zay Jones, I actually have getting the second most targets in the wide receiver room. I think it's just the experience. Michael Wilson's been there for 2 years? So he's still young, but I agree. Arizona's team still love him. So if anybody were to break out, it would for sure be him. I agree. Keep an eye on him. But I have Zay Jones barely edging him out. I have Zay Jones at 133 and Michael Wilson at 132. So, I don't know. Yeah, keep an eye on Michael Wilson just because, like you said, they do love him.
I'm not a Zay Jones believer personally.
That's fine. I mean, neither of them are fantasy relevant for me, but
Mm-hmm.
I think that Zay Jones is going to get wide receiver 3 work, but it's good enough for the wide receiver 2 in Arizona.
Yeah. Trey McBride, very fantasy relevant. He's so good. 201.7 fantasy points. That 201.7 is good enough to be the tight end 6. Last year, McBride finished as the tight end 7. So he still becomes a top 8 tight end and really the most relevant tight end, one of the most relevant tight ends for next year. So really, top 8 guys is who you should be drafting. After that, just don't draft a tight end. Look for free agents.
I absolutely despise Trey McBride. That's just due to the fact of what he did to me in the playoffs last year. I think I still have him as a top 10 tight end. I have him at number 10. I only gave him 165 points, but I think he's going to take a hit just due to the fact that Kyler Murray didn't play last year, and Kyler is a guy
That's okay.
Well, Kyler, no, here's the thing. Kyler wants to air it out. And guys like Clayton Tune and whoever else they had there are looking for shorter security blankets, and I think McBride was that. So he's not going to be bad by any means, but I think he's going to take a little bit of a step back. Tight end 7 last year. I have him tight end 10.
I can see it, but I still think Trey McBride will go deep a lot of times and be Kyler Murray's safety blanket. Like you mentioned, he's going to be a safety blanket, but he's still going to be a well-deserving guy in the tight end category.
It's all right. I don't hate it. I remember last year, I believe it was the semifinals, and like obviously the Cardinals are playing for nothing, and for some reason McBride had like 100 yards and 2 touchdowns or something like that, and it just killed me. I hated seeing it.
Yeah, it's really. But Gary, one more team to go. One more team.
Let's go.
It is the San Francisco 49ers. Talk to me about Mr. Brock Purdy, Mr. Irrelevant. Is he still relevant?
Of course. How can he not be? I have another good ratio, 30 and 12. I don't know how many yards you gave him, but I gave him 4,700.
I gave him more.
Did you?
Just shy,
Wow.
45 yards shy of 5.
Well, I'll get out of the way. I am at 317, which is good enough for last year's score. 6, exactly where he finished last year.
He finished with 306.6 fantasy points last year. I have him breaking that significantly. Wow. 361 flat fantasy points. This guy is remarkable. That 361 is good enough to be the QB3. He's fantastic.
I agree with you. I don't hate it at all.
For running backs, let's talk about CMC. I mean, this is kind of no-brainers. If you have a Brock Purdy, Christian McCaffrey, Debo, Ayuk, or Kittle, Kittle's iffy, but Kittle's still good. You have any of those on your team, they're locks. You have to start them. CMC reigns as the RB1 last year, and not many running backs get to finish as the RB1 back-to-back seasons, maybe even three-peat it. CMC is the guy to do it, finishing with 393 fantasy points, which is just 2 points more than what he did last year, finishing as the RB1.
Yeah, it's the same thing for me. Finishes the number 1 back. I have him 5 points less than last year. No idea why exactly, but that's just how it went. He went 24.5 points a game last year.
Yeah.
That's 8 more than the next guy in Breece Hall. It's just crazy to think. I gave him just shy of 1,500 rushing yards, 13 rushing touchdowns, 19 touchdowns. I gave him almost 600 receiving yards. I put him at 386.8. Again, 5 points less, but still comes up as the number 1 back.
Perfect. Now, wide receivers, Debo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk. Brandon Ayuk, I have the only guy finishing actually with over 1,000 receiving yards. Debo Samuel does not get over 1,000 receiving yards. Brandon Ayuk finishes with 260.5 fantasy points. The 260.5 is good enough to be the wide receiver 12. Last year, he finished as the wide receiver 14. As for Debo, on the other hand, he finishes with 237.5 fantasy points. That 237.5 is good enough to be wide receiver 16. He finished last year as wide receiver 15.
So I also don't have Debo eclipsing 1,000. I have Brandon.
I love it because I really was hoping. I really thought you were going to have him eclipse 1,000.
I don't. I have Brandon Ayuk 1,250. I have Debo at 880. Touchdowns are only a 1 touchdown difference in favor of Ayuk, but the rushing for Debo Samuel makes me put him over Brandon Ayuk.
Okay.
I'm saying that, but
okay.
I have him finishing just about the same. I have Debo at 253.6. Good enough for last year's wide receiver 13. Ayuk, 247.8. Good enough for last year's 15. So
okay. It's not bad.
Right around, but I mean, Ayuk finished at 14 and Debo was at 15. So I literally just have Debo going up 2 spots and Ayuk going down 1. So it's pretty much around the same spot. Yeah, I think both these guys are special, obviously. But we don't know if Ayuk's even going to be here.
Yeah.
So if he's not, Debo is going to crack into the top 10. So.
Oh, I completely agree with you on that. And even Keith, our co-host Keith, who's not with us today, shout out to him. You can go follow him at SwampDonkey_90 and on his Instagram, HuddleUp_NFL. Got to shout him out. Haven't done so in a while. Keith says Ayuk with over 1,000 receiving yards, but not for the 49ers. Obviously, he's thinking maybe Washington Commanders. But here's my question for you, Gary, because obviously Debo will eclipse 1,000 if Ayuk's gone. But they did draft Ricky Pearsall. Pearsall can be so fantasy relevant if Ayuk leaves. Pearsall, I have right now with 119.6 fantasy points. That 119, it's good enough for the wide receiver 58, which isn't relevant right now. But I have 103 targets dedicated for Brandon Ayuk. If he's gone, 103 targets need to be spread out to the other receivers. And Ricky Pearsall I have with 64. He can very much eclipse 100 targets.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I have 110 targets in favor of Ayuk, and only 55 in favor of Pearsall. But yeah, at 110 targets, they're going to have to go somewhere, and I could see half of them going to Pearsall. I only have him at 92.5 points right now, but it could very much double. I wouldn't be surprised if Ayuk were to leave. So yeah, he's not fantasy relevant right now. I'm not even going to look because he's under 100. But like I said, it could very much double and even a little bit more than that if Ayuk were to leave. I wouldn't be surprised at all.
Keith saying Steelers would be a good move. I think overall, who would you rather see him go, Steelers or Commanders, for fantasy purposes, Gary?
Okay, glad you put that in there because
I had to put that in there to make sure that we know.
Well, that's actually still a tough question because I don't know. I really don't know how the Steelers are going to be with Russ at quarterback. I mean, he's going to start.
Or Justin Fields.
As much as I would love Justin Fields to be the starter, he's probably not. Yeah, it's going to be Russ, I think, especially just for the fact that they have him for that 1 year as of right now. So I really don't know how that would go. And it looks like Ayuk would love to play with Jaden Daniels. So I might still pick Washington. I
think.
Go ahead.
Now, I was thinking, I agree with you with picking Washington, but not for fantasy purposes. I think he can thrive if he goes to Pittsburgh more.
Okay, I mean that's. I would see both ways because I think you get obviously the Hall of Fame experience quarterback play of Russell Wilson. But at the same time, you get the.
Is Russell Wilson a Hall of Famer?
Yes, he's a Hall of Famer. Yes. Come on now.
I had to ask the question.
But then you get, obviously the fiery spirit of a guy, Jaden Daniels, just fresh off the Heisman, coming in, wants to show what he can do. And he's got a stud wide receiver 1 in his back pocket and a stud what would move to wide receiver 2 in his other back pocket. So he's obviously going to be playing for something. And Ayuk, like I said, seems like he'd love to play with Jaden Daniels. So I think that he would excel either spot. But as a Browns fan, I'd much rather like to see him go to Washington.
Fair enough. I can see it. We'll see. I'm sure by next week when Keith is back, we're gonna have to talk about it. About who is he gonna be, or maybe the saga will keep going.
He might have a deal by that time.
Huh?
I said he honestly might have a deal by that time.
I think he'll either have a deal or get traded. There's no way by next Friday that he won't have a deal. Yeah. Finishing out the San Francisco team, George Kittle, fantasy relevant, of course, for the tight end group. He finishes with a total of 211.6 fantasy points. The 211.6 is good enough to be the tight end 5, which is exactly where he finished last year.
I only gave him 190, which was good for tight end 7 last year. A little bit of a fall off, but I think that's just because I have Debo doing so well with the rushing attempts, and obviously they have CMC. I think they're going to lean a little bit more on that rushing game. What wasn't working for them in the Super Bowl, let's be honest. They kind of just shied away from it after halftime, and that's what gave the Chiefs an open door. So I think they're really, really going to lean on it this year, and that's kind of going to hurt Kittle a little bit, but it's still tight end 7.
Okay. I don't mind it. It's a good shout, to be honest. Kittle still being a top 10. I'm not surprised. Not a fan of him, but I'm not surprised.
Neither am I, yeah.
Well, that's it. We finished. It's been hours on hours that we've worked on this, but it is now time to look at the top 5 quarterbacks that we have. Or do you want to look at top 10? Let me ask you, do you want to look at top 10 or top 5?
It's whatever you want to do. I'm not going to lie, I haven't looked at it at all, so I'm very excited, except for when we looked at it halfway through at the end of the AFC. But, as a whole, I haven't looked at it at all, so I'm so excited to see.
You know what? We're going to do top 10 because I have some interesting things to say for top 10. Top 10 quarterbacks, let's dive into it. Top 10, who do you have at 10?
Quarterback 10, wow. This far down, I have CJ Stroud.
I have Patrick Mahomes.
Wow.
QB 9.
QB 9 for me is Anthony Richardson.
Wow. Richardson's QB 16 for me. I have QB 9 Kyler Murray.
Okay.
QB 8.
Jay Love.
Ooh, Jordan Love's a little higher for me. QB 8 for me is Mr. Burrow Nation, Joe Burrow. QB 7, I'll stick with the purdiness of it, Brock Purdy.
Okay. I got Dak.
Okay. Dak's a little higher than me. For me, QB 6 is Justin Herbert. He's back in the top 10.
QB 6 is also Justin Herbert for me, and forgot to mention Purdy is just outside the top 10 for me. Quarterback 11.
Okay. QB 5, Dak Prescott for me.
QB 5, I got Kyler. There's your guy. So.
There's my guy. I love it. QB 4 is Jordan Love.
QB 4, Patty.
Patty Mahomes. You talked about how he's back.
I think he's going to be back to that top 5 quarterbacks fleet. I think it's going to happen.
QB 3, CJ Stroud.
I love it, but I got Jalen Hurts.
QB 2, Jalen Hurts.
QB 2, I got Lamar.
Oh my goodness. Okay. QB 1, Josh Allen.
Obviously, yeah.
Can I just say?
Notice something?
Back, Lamar Jackson is outside my top 10 quarterbacks.
No way.
Lamar Jackson is QB 11 for me. QB 11.
Well, did you notice the name missing off my list at all?
Was it? You said all the guys that are in the top 10 except Joe Burrow.
I have Joe Burrow coming in at quarterback 16.
Joe Burrow, QB 16. That's ridiculous. That is
Wow.
criminal. Criminal.
It's really bad looking back at it. But I have him eclipsing 300 points. I mean, I talked about it a few shows ago where there was only 7 that did it this past year. But I have 16 doing it this year. So, I mean, I don't know. It's crazy. I have Caleb Williams a spot above him. It's like, I don't know. It's crazy to think, but that's what I got.
For running backs, I want to hear this because this is going to be wild. Who's your top 10? Who's your number 10?
Yeah.
PPR.
Right now,
PPR format.
Yeah. So I have Eckler at 11, which
Okay.
I'll just throw out there. RB10, I have James Cook.
James Cook. Where do I have Cook? I don't even know. Where is he cooking? I don't know. Is he cooking anything? Oh, he's my RB4.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, he's up there. Number 10, Ezekiel Elliott.
Don't hate it. RB9, I have ETN, who I don't like, but he's going to crack it.
Yeah, I have him. I think, outside. ETN is, if I can find, RB3. Kyron Williams is my RB9.
Okay. I mean, he'll be better. But my RB8, Jaylen Warren.
You love Jaylen Warren. You love the dude.
This year I do. Yep, I do.
I have Jaylen Warren as my RB20.
Wow.
Yeah. King Henry is my RB8.
RB7, I have Jahmyr Gibbs.
Saquon Barkley. Jahmyr Gibbs is outside my top 10. RB13.
Barkley's outside mine. He sits at RB12. RB6, I have King Henry.
Rashad White.
Don't hate it. He's a few spots higher from me. RB5, my guy this year, Kyron Williams.
Ooh, Devon A-Chain for me.
That's hold on. Let me see where he is for me. Devon A-Chain comes in at RB31 for me.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Yep. RB31.
RB31 for Devon A-Chain, and I have him as an RB5.
RB4, Rashad White.
James Cook.
All right. I mean, I don't hate it.
I think our 1 and 2 is gonna be the same.
Probably my RB3, Bijan.
Bijan is RB17 for me.
Yeah.
ETN's my 3.
RB2, Brees Hall, where he was last year.
Exactly our 1 and 2. CMC RB1. Brees Hall, my RB2.
Yep, exactly right.
Going into the wide receiver top 10, who's number 10 for you, Gary? For PPR, of course.
For PPR formats, my wide receiver 10 is Mike Evans.
Mike Evans. Where do I have Evans? I have him right outside, wide receiver 11. AJ Brown is wide receiver 10 for me.
I actually don't have AJ Brown in my top 10.
Ooh, spicy.
Yep, I got him at 14. Wide receiver 9, I can't believe it. Wow, Zay Flowers.
No way. I have Zay Flowers, wide receiver 19. I have Diggs at 9.
Stephon Diggs, I will reveal his place a little bit later.
Wide receiver 8.
Wide receiver 8, I got Puka.
Puka? He's inside my top 10. Garrett Wilson's my 8.
Love it. I got him a few spots ahead. Wide receiver 7, it's going to happen again. It's inevitable. Devontae Adams.
Yeah, not going to happen. I hate to break it to you. Adams is wide receiver 26 for me.
Oh my God, how terrible of a take. Okay.
I didn't think he was that far down. I never thought he was that far down. Going into George Pickens as wide receiver 7 for me. Olave, wide receiver 6.
Pickens. Wide receiver 28 for me. All right.
Yeah, crazy.
Not as much as having Devontae down there, but okay.
Devontae Adams is washed.
They were so stupid. All right. OSU's own Garrett Wilson sits in the number 6 slot for me.
Fair enough. And Olave, of course. Puka Nacua comes in at 5.
I got him on Raw. I love him.
Yeah, love it. 4 is Jamar Chase.
Jamar Chase for me at 4.
3 is Amon Ra for me.
3 is Jettas.
Jay Jettas. Justin Jefferson's outside my top 10. He's wide receiver 14.
I can't believe that. I mean, especially
I love
especially with your
Justin Jefferson. I love Justin Jefferson. And he's outside my top 10.
Who's your 3? Amon-Ra?
Amon-Ra. And I think our 1 and 2 is the same. Tyreek 1, CD 2.
No.
CD 1 for you, Tyreek 2.
Yeah.
Yeah. How many points of a difference do you have, CD and Tyreek?
30.
I have. Sorry, that again?
31.
31? I have only a 13-point difference.
Yeah, I got CD coming in with 378 and a half. Tyreek Hill at 348. So.
Wow. Top 10 tight ends in PPR leagues. Number 10, Jake Ferguson.
My number 10, Kyle Pitts.
Oh, that's okay. He's tight end 11 for me. Tight end 9, Brock Bowers.
I love it. I got him in 13, but I wouldn't be surprised at all. Number 9, I have Kittle. So
okay, I like it. He's in my top 10. Tight end 8, Trey McBride.
I actually have him at 11.
Okay.
I'm looking back at it, but I don't hate that. 10 and 8, I have Ferguson. He's going to be in the top 10.
Yeah, he is. 10 and 7, you're going to love this guy. David Njoku.
Yeah, I got him a spot higher. He's number 6 for me. Number 7, I got Jacksonville's own Evan Ingram.
Okay, I like it. Njoku for you at 6. Kittle for me at tight end 6.
Don't hate it. I also don't hate this next guy at tight end 5 for me, Dalton Kincaid.
Ooh, I love it. I love that. Dalton Kincaid's actually my tight end 13.
Okay, not bad. I think he's going to have a great year.
Mark Andrews is my 5.
I know you're not going to like this, but I got Laporta at 4.
Oh, my God, that's criminal. That is highway robbery.
I don't understand how, but I know he was tight end 1 last year. But, again, it was a dud year for fantasy last year. The top 3 guys are going to return to the top 3.
TJ Hawkinson is my 4.
Okay. I mean, I don't hate it. What I do hate is the fact that at tight end 3, I have Travis Kelce.
I have Travis Kelce at tight end 3 as well.
Wow.
Travis Kelce is not there. He's washed. No, I'm just kidding. He's still really good. Let's be real. Yeah. I'm excited to hear your tight end 2 because I have Evan Ingram at tight end 2.
Wow. I like it. My tight end 2 is Mark Andrews.
That's where he fell.
Yeah.
Okay. Who's your tight end 1?
TJ Hawkinson.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Sam Laporta is my tight end 1. He comes back.
I mean, that's fine. What I think people are forgetting is that Hawkinson was tight end 1 before he got hurt.
You're very true. You are very true about that fact.
Now he's got a guy that is he gonna go deep? I don't know.
True.
No. So I love him again.
Well, that's going to do it. We're finally done through 32 teams. Again, if you haven't done so already, go to Underdog Fantasy. Use that code SportsTimeHQ. They're going to match first deposit up to $100. Once again, it's code SportsTimeHQ on Underdog Fantasy. They're going to match yourself a free $100. And if you want to go get a trophy like this or a special box like this that has something mysterious in there, and Gary will see it tomorrow as well, go to trophysmack.com/sportstimehq. Go get yourself a trophy, ring, belt, any type of merchandise from them is amazing. Again, trophysmack.com/sportstimehq. We're not back next week on Thursday. Why? Because it's 4th of July. Go out, go enjoy your time on 4th of July. Go have some fun. If you're outside the United States, well, enjoy the day then. We'll be back next Friday at 6 p.m. once again as my light turned off. But I'm here with my great co-host, Gary. You can go follow him all over social media at gary.dombeck. And go follow myself, Fernando, at SportsTimeHQ. We're going to have Keith back next week. And you can follow him all over social media at SwampDonkey_90, as well as HuddleUp_NFL on Instagram. I'm Fernando. I'm your host, Sports Time HQ. It was a long show, but we got through it. We'll see you all next Friday.